Russian policymakers are faced with a delicate balancing act in the wake of the U.S.-Israel conflict. In order to avoid pointing fingers, Moscow is calling for an immediate end to the bloodshed. Hello everyone. We promise to shock you in today's video. Israel is sent a grave warning by Russia. The president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, has said that the refusal to recognize a Palestinian state in line with UN resolutions and injustice was the root cause of the conflict. He blamed the intensification of the situation on Israel's settlement efforts. To make sure you don't miss any of the future instructional films we release, please subscribe to our channel by clicking the bell symbol before we go on to the next video. The Russian government is being careful because of its long history of relations with regional players like Israel and the Palestinians. In addition, it reveals that the Kremlin plans to increase its mediation clout in the Middle East. Russia has tried to paint the conflicts as a reflection of U.S. strategy, drawing criticism on Washington and its allies while directing the spotlight to Russia's continued military aid to Ukraine. Chancellor Olaf Scholz of Germany makes an appearance during a cabinet meeting in Berlin, Germany's chancellery, on October 25, 2023. Following a court hearing in Moscow on Wednesday, October 11, 2023, OLG Orov, a board member of the International Historical Educational Charitable and Human Rights Society, paid tribute with gestures. Germany has passed legislation to facilitate the deportation of asylum seekers whose requests are denied in Russia. As a result of his criticism of Russia's actions in Ukraine, Orlov, co-chair of the Nobel Peace Prize-winning human rights group Memorial, was fined almost $1,500 by the court for what he allegedly did to discourage the Russian military. A human rights activist who spoke out against the conflict in Ukraine on September 13, 2023, was punished by Russian authorities. Near Blagoveshchensk, in Russia's far eastern Amber region, some 200 kilometers 25 meters away, on September 13, 2023, Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un clasped hands at the enormous cosmodrome outside the city of Tsiolkovsky. On Monday, September 25th, North Korea criticized South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, calling him a diplomat and a dumb as rocks for bringing up the North's growing military relations with Russia during his UN address. Russia is reportedly obtaining military supplies from North Korea, as indicated by the think tank's analysis of the increasing train activity along the China-Russia border. According to Putin, it was because the U.S. had prioritized providing financial aid to the Palestinians while ignoring their main concerns on statehood, which he saw as a clear failure in Washington's peacemaking efforts. War escalation, he said, would be catastrophic, and he pleaded with the Israeli government and Hamas to stop murdering civilians. He stressed that all efforts must be taken to terminate the conflict quickly. Russia is trying to keep the peace with Israel and the Palestinians, according to Putin's well-thought-out remarks and his aides. Moscow must keep a level head and communicate with all parties, according to Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, who also said that Russia should be permitted to mediate a settlement. Russian officials are aiming to deflect attention from the crisis in Ukraine and weaken Western support for Kyiv, Peskov, by stepping into the role of a possible mediator. Another target of his satire was Vladimir Zelensky, president of Ukraine, whom he said should be jealous of the United States' present Cold War-era emphasis on supplying military aid to Israel. The Palestinians and their Arab allies received diplomatic and military help from Moscow as they opposed Israel. Just before the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the Soviet Union severed diplomatic relations with Israel after the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. Their goals shifted when Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev restructured foreign policy and restored connections with Israel. As a consequence of political turmoil and economic disaster in the decade after the Soviet Union's collapse, Russia's worldwide influence decreased, and the Kremlin retreated inward after taking power. In his efforts to repair damaged relationships in the Middle East, Putin maintained tight connections with Israel, With the US, EU, and UN as mediators in the Middle East, Russia was one of 4 parties in 2015, albeit it was less active than US. In a coordinated effort, Moscow and Iran sent fighters and ground forces to Syria, has long been a supporter of President Bashar Assad's government, which has received backing from Russia in the ongoing civil war. With the help of Russian assistance, Assad regained control of most of Syria, expanding Moscow's sphere of influence in the region. How close are Russia and Israel compared to how they were before the Soviet Union collapsed? Israel and Russia have strengthened their security ties and built commercial and other ties throughout time. Even though the Israeli military frequently attacked Iranian forces that had joined forces with Russian troops in Syria, over 1 million people from Russia and other former Soviet states have moved to Israel. This has been recognized as a crucial factor in improving relations between the two countries. Russia maintained cordial ties with Israel during 2018, despite its involvement in the Middle East. A Russian spy aircraft was shot down in 2018 by Assad's troops in retaliation to an Israeli strike, killing all 15 personnel on board. Incidentally, ties were briefly strained, despite deconfliction channels being maintained by Russian and Israeli soldiers throughout the Syrian conflict. The Russian-Israeli alliance has been greatly challenged by Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Israeli authorities have been cautious, expressing feelings of compassion for the KV, but declining to provide it with weapons. As a result of Putin's claim that Jewish Zelensky was a neo-Nazi, many Israelis were very angry. Russian President Vladimir Putin infuriated Ukrainian leaders with an early remark in which he lauded Israel's mediation efforts. Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, explained why his government was hesitant to provide military gear to KI by citing the need to maintain security links with Moscow and Syria and the fear that weaponry sent to Ukraine may go into Iranian hands. What changes occurred in Russian-Palestinian relations throughout the Cold War? Providing political, economic, and military support, Moscow was the Palestinians' principal ally. A large portion of the Palestinian army's funding and equipment came from the Soviet Union. Despite the Kremlin's attention on domestic issues after the fall of the Soviet Union, Putin has sought to reinforce these connections, approach while dealing with Hamas. While visiting Moscow in September 2022, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas had many meetings with Russian officials. In 1979, Ismail Khan, head of Hamas, met with Sergei Lavrov, State Minister of Russia. A lesser Satan than the United States, according to the leaders of Iran's Islamic Revolution, was the Soviet Union. As Iran's relations with the West deteriorated, however, Russia and Iran developed strong connections after the fall of the Soviet Union. In addition to strengthening relations with Iran, Moscow constructed the country's first nuclear power facility. The Syrian conflict brought Iran and Syria closer together as the two countries sided with Assad's government. Iran has supplied Russia with hundreds of shaded explosive drones, which the Russian military has used to attack vital energy and infrastructure sectors in Ukraine throughout the conflict. Russian officials have said that they received drone technology from Iran and constructed a prediction facility as a reciprocation. The expansion of Moscow's global influence is likely to include the supply of Iran with state-of-the-art fighter planes and other technological advancements. Relationships between Russia and Saudi Arabia have been reinforced. In spite of Saudi Arabia's support for Assad's detractors and Moscow's backing for Riyadh, Iran's principal regional foe was able to put their disagreements aside and increase their cooperation on other fronts. Over the last several years, as tensions have mounted in Saudi Arabia, Putin and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman have grown closer via personal connections. Oil-producing nations reaped the benefits of falling oil prices thanks to Putin's connections to bin Salman, who facilitated an OPEC agreement to reduce oil flow between Moscow and Riyadh. Here ends the video for today. A fresh conflict in the Middle East would be welcomed by Russia's President Vladimir Putin as a means to divert Western focus and resources from Ukraine. On a global scale, Moscow is trying to generate diversions and pressure points. Please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up if you like it and would want to see more films like it.